Hello, everyone. Thank you very much
Hi.
for joining us again. We're really pleased that you're able to be with us as we pick up our story today. And you may remember a couple of weeks ago that we were looking at the story of Joseph. The story of Joseph, he was the favorite son, right? He was Jacob's favorite son of 12 sons, and he favored him so much he gave him the fancy coat, and that made his brothers jealous, and his brothers were mean to him, and as a result, his brothers worked it out so that he got to be sold into slavery in Egypt. And things, even in Egypt, that was really bad because he was taken away from home. And so I want to pick up that story, but I also want to remind you of the context, the situation where all that story sits. And I'm going to start with this. You may remember we talked about this before. This is, there we go. I want to start with this side. So there's that picture, and that reminds us about how God in the beginning created all the universe. He created the world, and God created us. And He created us to be in a unique and special relationship with Him. But we didn't always make the best choices, and we rebelled against that. And sometimes I rebel against that as well, and maybe you do as well. And so, because of our rebellion, our relationship with God got worse. And so, that's the sad face about that. But even though that happened and we were disobedient, God still loved us. And so, God went through the process of trying to create a new relationship, and He started with one particular group of people. And I just mentioned Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He started with a man named Abraham. And Abraham's son was Isaac, and Isaac's son was Jacob. And Jacob had 12 sons, as I mentioned, and one of them was Joseph. So that's where this story sits in the story of God's plan of trying to restore that relationship that we had. And of course, eventually, that relationship is restored through Jesus Christ. So you may remember we used to be talking about all of our ancestors in the faith. And Joseph is one of our ancestors in the faith because he's one of Jesus' ancestors in the faith. He's one of Jesus' great, 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 great
Grandfather?
grandfather. Exactly. If you go back far enough, Joseph would be one of Jesus' great, 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 great. I can't remember how many great, 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 great you get to Joseph. And so through Joseph's family, Jesus is sent to be our savior and to restore our relationship. And we get to live in that relationship as members of the church, as members of the body of Christ, as we await Jesus coming again and the fulfillment of that promise in the life of heaven. So that's the context in which this story is set. And you may remember when we finished up a couple of weeks ago with the story, we told a story about Joseph actually being in prison because when he went to Egypt, things went from bad from worse. He was forced to leave his home and his family, and I showed you this map before and showed you that Egypt is here. That's in my color, that's pink. But over here was where Joseph was from. So he was taken away violently, and he was taken to be a slave in a new country, in a new land, and didn't have any contact with his family forever, for years and years and years. And we're going to talk about that. That gets fixed when we sit down next week. But in Egypt, even though Joseph was faithful to God, Joseph, even though things went from bad to worse to worse to worse, and things got worse, Joseph didn't give up. He continued to be faithful to God, and God was faithful to him. And so you may remember when we dropped the story last time, Joseph was in prison because he had been falsely accused of something he did not do, and he was arrested and put in prison. But even in prison, God was with him, and God gave him power. God gave him power to be strong, to be faithful, to be hardworking. And even in prison, God was giving him abilities. And one of the abilities that God gave him was the ability to interpret people's dreams. There were two people in prison with him. And Joseph interpreted their dreams. You may remember one of those was the butler or the cupbearer for the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And Joseph predicted that the cupbearer, the butler, would be eventually released from prison and restored to his role. And that's where we left the story last time. And even though Joseph had asked the butler that when he gets released, please let Pharaoh know about me, and so I can get out of prison. The butler, the cupbearer, never remembered, never remembered Joseph until
Until.
until about a couple of years later, and Pharaoh was having some bad dreams. He was having some very worrisome, troublesome dreams. I don't know if you guys ever have dreams that worry you or frighten you, but Pharaoh was having some bad dreams, and he told that to the cupbearer, to the butler, and he said, finally, the cupbearer, the butler, remembered, oh, yeah, there was this guy named Joseph in prison, and he could interpret dreams. And so Pharaoh sends, Joseph is allowed to get out of prison, and Joseph meets Pharaoh and says that he can't interpret Pharaoh's dreams, but God can. And so Pharaoh tells Joseph his dreams, and they're really strange dreams. In fact, the two dreams had similar kinds of themes. The one is that there were 7 fat cows. You think about cows. There were 7 fat cows, and then there's 7 lean, scrawny-looking cows. And the 7 scrawny cows ate the 7 fat cows. That's a weird kind of dream. And then there was a second dream, and the dream had to do with 7 ears of corn, 7 really good ears of corn. But there were also 7 really, really bad ears of corn, and the 7 bad ears of corn swallowed up the 7 good ears of corn. So both, different things, cows and corn, but they had a similar kind of theme. And so Joseph interpreted the dream and the dreams. And what Joseph said was, what's going to happen is you're going to have 7 years of really good weather and 7 years of really good harvest. And you'll have lots of food for those 7 years. But then you're going to have 7 bad years. Not enough rain, not enough ability for the plants to grow, and you're not going to have enough food. So Joseph had a plan. What you should do is, when you have all this extra food, set it aside. Don't waste it. Set it aside. Store it up for those 7 years so that when you get the 7 bad years, you'll have enough to be able to get through that. And that's exactly what happened. I don't know this. You guys ever do this? Whether you have, when I was younger, we had something we called a piggy bank, and we would put our coins back in. Things, maybe you guys don't even know what they are. Things called pennies, for example, or nickels, or dimes, or quarters.
Or loonies.
We didn't have loonies back then, or toonies back then. But we would put our money in, and then we would have that saved up so that if we wanted to buy something later on, a year down the road or 2 years down the road, we could do that. Or sometimes, of course, people use bank accounts to do the same thing. Put aside a little bit of money when they have extra money so that they have some money later on. And that's exactly what Joseph was advising Pharaoh to do, to set aside some extra when things were going well so they'd have some when things weren't going well. So if you think about it, think what was happening there. God was with Joseph all through those bad times. Sold, forced, dragged away from home and family, dragged to a foreign country, and then falsely accused and put in prison and staying in prison for years. And yet God wasn't forgetting Joseph, and Joseph didn't forget God. That God was with Joseph all through that. God helped Joseph, and then Joseph helped Pharaoh. So we're going to pick up that story in just a minute, but Janice has a couple of crafts that she wants to show.
I do have a couple of crafts. This one's a puzzle. I put some color on it so you can see it, and you might not be able to see it online, but there are lines drawn down, like divided lines, and you can trim along those. So I'm going to cut the outer edge of it first. So you color it first, and I put some color on it so you can see that.
So what you're going to make actually is a jigsaw puzzle.
So you just cut off your ends. Very simple. You might want to color it first before you cut it up. And it's a picture of Joseph managing the stores for Egypt. So you can see stuff arriving, and Joseph's directing them where to put stuff into storage.
Because the amazing thing is that Joseph had been in prison, and then he was let out to go talk to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh thought the idea was such a great idea that Pharaoh made Joseph in charge of the plan. So he didn't just take Joseph's advice, but he put Joseph in charge. And so Joseph became the second person in the entire kingdom. Pharaoh was the most important person in the kingdom, and Joseph was the second most important.
So I'm going to cut my strips here. And then I think you can just cut each one of the strips into other pieces.
Into other pieces, yeah, exactly.
I'll just show you with one here.
You could even put them all together and cut them at the same time.
You could. That is a very good idea. So I'm going to stack them all together like this. And I'm going to use my scissors. I'm going to make it difficult. You could cut them just into squares, but I think I'm going to cut some shapes. And then that will make you spend a little bit more time putting it together.
Exactly.
So there you have all your little pieces.
Sorry. Raise your hand. There you go.
All your little pieces. And you can just lay them all out in front of you and try to reconstruct the picture of Joseph directing all the stores.
That's neat. A really quick way to make a puzzle. So color it first, and then of course then cut it out, and then you have your own puzzle. That's one craft.
And then this one is an Egyptian headdress, which you can color, and then you're going to cut it out too. And I have a piece of heavier paper, although you could use a pie plate or something if you had that. And I cut it into a circle. I took a plate and I put it down and drew around it and then cut it out.
That's,
so I got
that's
a good
if you're
circle.
not really good at drawing. If you're good at drawing
If you're good at
circles,
you go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
not, so I decided to do it this way. And then I'm just going to quickly draw a face, just a simple face, a couple eyes, and a mouth onto this. And I'm just going to do some quick cutting so that you can see.
she's going to cut that out.
After you've colored this one, you would cut it out all the way, even the edges too. But I'm, for the sake of time, just going to.
So this
do a
and
quick
this
check.
picture, which we'll send out as a coloring picture for you guys, shows you the kind of headdress that would have been worn by people in charge in Egypt. So this is what that headdress is all about. So you're going to make a Joseph character or a Pharaoh character for that matter. In fact, if you print that sheet off a couple of times, you could actually make a couple or 2 or 3 different characters.
And then you're going to. I didn't bring my glue. I forgot. You're going to glue the face into the center, and then if you got a stick, you could put that at the bottom, tape that on, and you actually could have puppets.
You could actually
And
tell the
you
story.
and your parents or you and your siblings could actually tell the story with these puppets of Joseph and the butler and the dreams and Pharaoh. So you could do the whole thing.
Exactly.
You could look it up in your Bible, or
you could wear it as well.
you can wear it,
And I guess you cut out the outside
you
too.
cut out the outside too. So that one's really fun. I like this one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's lots to do. And then I have another one. I'm not going to really show you how to do it, but we're going to include it. And it's a toilet paper roll, and you bunch up some paper and put it in
Some
it.
yellow paper.
And then you wrap it, and then you slit it, and it looks like an ear of corn.
So you may remember that in the second dream of Pharaoh, it was the 7 fat ears of corn, the 7 healthy ears of corn, and then the 7 lean ones. So you can actually even do this a couple of times. You can actually make both the healthy ears of corn and the unhealthy ears of corn. You could, in fact, if you wanted the unhealthy, you wouldn't have to put yellow in the inside. You could put brown or something like that.
Make them look like they're not very nice to eat.
Exactly.
So you can spend some time working on these crafts and going over the story of Joseph. It's fun. I'm going to work on this puzzle. I think I love a puzzle. So
she does.
I'm going to work on trying to get a puzzle here together. So.
There we go. I'm going to give you all your puzzle pieces back. I think you must have about 30 puzzle pieces there, or 35. So just to wrap up. So I think one of the important things for us to think about in this Joseph lesson is that I suspect this happens to you from time to time. I know it happens to other people. I know it sometimes happens to me as well. Sometimes things happen in our lives which make us sad. Sometimes bad things happen to us, just like bad things happened to Joseph. And sometimes when those bad things happen to us or to someone we care about, sometimes we wonder, why is God letting this bad thing happen? Why is God letting this happen? And we learn from Joseph that even though bad things happen to us, it doesn't mean that God has forgotten us, or that God is ignoring us, or God is punishing us. What it sometimes means is God is going to do some great things, because the amazing thing about the Joseph story is, and we'll find out all about this really next week when we come to the end of the Joseph story, the amazing thing is that God had a plan from the beginning. And actually, as a result of Joseph and the way in which God helped Joseph in Egypt, Joseph was actually able to save hundreds and thousands of people's lives because of this plan, right? So that they wouldn't starve when things went bad and there wasn't enough food, by having enough food set aside beforehand. So hundreds and thousands of people's lives were being saved, even, we're going to discover next week, even Joseph's family's lives. And so God had a plan, and even though bad things were happening, God was going to do something great with Joseph. And so God stayed with Joseph all through that time, sold as a slave, a prisoner in jail, but also as the second most important person in Egypt. God had a plan, and Joseph was able to work with God because Joseph remained faithful to God. So it's a great lesson, I think, for me, that sometimes when things don't go well, bad things happen in my life, and I'm a little concerned maybe God is not helping me, God is not thinking about me, God's not concerned about me, he doesn't love me. Hopefully I remember the story of Joseph and say, yeah, God never stops loving me, and God is going to be with me. God was with Joseph in Egypt. God is going to be with me, and if I remain faithful, God is going to bring something good out of all of this. So that's our lesson for today. Hope you enjoy the crafts to work on, and we're going to pick up and finish up the story of Joseph next week with an amazing scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in all the Bible. So we look forward to seeing you next week. and hope you guys have a great week between now and then. Take care and God bless.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.